Oh, okay. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
You all had a great holiday and Happy New Year. This is the subcommittee for our large task force focusing on how we can collect revenue and distribute it 169 town and city. Today we are just focusing on, and we sent also two articles. I'm sure you all look into closely, see how we can generate the income and distribute it the 169 town and city. And if you have any idea or any thought, please kindly present your thought and idea. And I would like to ask my co-chair if you want to say a few words. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Happy holidays, happy New Year, everyone. I'd like to thank my co-chair Raman for kicking us off here. Also, all the volunteers who have willingly put forward their time and their ideas to take part in this task force. With that said, I think we can begin, Senator.
Thank you. So begin, we just want to discuss, I know the Dr. Anwar have some idea. He sent the email, so you can begin to present your idea and thought. Thank you.
Hi. Good morning. I think a few of us have some ideas that we actually have. So one thing that we have always heard that the towns would like to retain the revenue that has been being generated from the motor vehicle tax. And that's the way it should be. So I would like to start by saying that the town will collect the motor vehicle tax the way it is doing it right now, without changing this particular mode of operation. Because if it is articulated that the state is going to take care of it, or in other sense that the state is going to reimburse the towns, then there's a likelihood maybe in the far future that the legislators may actually act to rescind any such agreement. And that is going to be a disaster. So as far as this committee is concerned, our proposal is to maintain that particular status quo of the town generating its own funding. With that being said, how to phase out the motor vehicle tax, as we have seen in the document that was provided to us, especially Rhode Island, West Virginia, Georgia, and so on. They actually have a timeline that actually goes over, let's say, 4 or 5 years. And in that particular period of time, it is being phased out. But the issue always has been that where do we get that extra revenue, and how will that be generated, as an example. So what I was thinking, that if it is legal or not, I don't know that. That needs to be worked out by the legal office in the legislature, legal officers at the legislative building. Is as an example, if my income, as an example, is 100K, and if the federal tax is about, let's say, 30%, then 30K is actually set aside for federal taxes. And prior to any other state or other taxes, I actually have 70,000. Now, if the suggestion is that before this particular tax, the state is going to set aside, as an example, 1% of my salary, or $1,000. It is pre-tax. Then my salary comes down to 99,000. And with the same tax rate, I'm paying instead of 30,000, 29.7K. And my salary is 70.3K. Or in other words, I'm making $300 more. And if I keep on doing it, let's say as an example, if my pre-tax contribution is 5,000, then my salary comes down from 100K to 95K. Taxes, federal tax withheld is going to be 28.5. And my salary right now, instead of being 70K, is 71.5, or an additional $1,500. See, so in other words, if the pre-tax contribution is only $1,000, which is 1%, then my extra income that I'm generating is $300. And the state has in its pocket additional $100, or in other words, the state has in its escrow account a total amount of $1,300. And that $1,300 could be actually given back to me when I file my taxes, and that amount happens to be under $1,300, and that is going to go towards my motor vehicle taxes. So, and that particular amount actually can be we can work it out that if it's going to be 1% or 2% or 5%, but it doesn't matter what the percentage is. If it is pre-tax, then my salary will actually never change. Or in other words, the salary after the federal tax withheld will never change. But the state is going to actually have an escrow account that is going to be, so as an example, if it is 5% tax withheld and my salary is 71.5K, the state right away takes in another $1,500. So because my salary is supposed to be 70,000. So I have this pre-tax was 5,000, and the state takes another $1,500 to ensure that my salary doesn't change. So in other words, the state actually has in its scope for an additional $6,500. And that is going to be more than enough to pay for to compensate for my motor vehicle tax that I actually have paid. That is, when it comes to motor vehicle tax, I will simply pay the way I'm doing it right now to my town. So the town doesn't see anything else. But if this particular process actually for the state to withhold part of my salary in actual escrow account, which is going to be my contribution towards motor vehicle taxes, then the state can actually have the necessary amount, which is going to be roughly around $1 billion, simply from my payroll taxes. So this is something we actually can work it out if the scheme is actually financially legal and reasonable. But it doesn't have any impact on my salary, and it actually, as a person, I'm getting totally compensated for the motor vehicle tax that actually I paid to my town. So, so this is what I was thinking, and I would like to see your comments, and I'll be happy to put things in writing so that the committee members can actually take a careful look at it, just to ensure that this is something worth looking into, and then we actually can move forward. So something similar was actually, not exactly similar, I shouldn't say it that way, but there was also a mechanism that was suggested by New York State that they have implemented, which is something slightly different, but comparative. The other thing that I would also like to say, that this is actually, this is going to compensate for my personal motor vehicle taxes. So if there is a town, as an example, like Windsor, and they are actually in the business of renting motor vehicles, rent a car, and so on and so forth. So they are actually not getting compensated at all, but the town is getting the money from that particular corporation the way they are doing right now. So this particular scheme compensates for any personal motor vehicle tax that actually have paid, and it doesn't cost, as far as my salary is concerned, cost a dime. So I think all the parties win. But the only issue is going to be if the federal government is going to like it or not, because they're actually losing some money. Thank you.
So, Dr. Anwar, I have a question, quick.
Yeah, please.
Do you have any idea if we follow this mechanism this is pretty much, I think you are suggesting the total wage reduction tax pretty much. And do you know how much will be generated?
The thing is, it is not a wage reduction as an example. My post-federal tax wage remains exactly the same. I do not lose a dime. Okay, so, and that particular amount can be adjusted so that the total is the $1 billion that we're asking for. So as an example, what I was saying, that if the amount that is withheld is 1%, and my salary is $100K, then the state right away siphons off $1,000. My net salary becomes $99,000. And the tax that I'm paying, assuming 30%, is $29,700. Or my salary goes up after tax from 70 to 70.3. And remember, that 0.3 or $300 is not mine. So that is going to be my contribution again to motor vehicle taxes. So that my net post federal tax withheld salary does not change at all. My wage after federal tax withheld did not change. But what I have done is I've contributed $300 now, and the state has already taken another $1,000 prior to that, or my net contribution is going to be $1,300. So if that amount doesn't satisfy that 1 billion, then I can go to 2% or 3% or 4%. But again, my post-federal tax withheld salary or wage does not change at all, but I keep on adding more towards that escrow account that the state has established. With that understanding is that this particular escrow account, which is going to be my account that the state has established, that is going to, when I file my motor vehicle tax, whatever the tax that I actually have filed will be compensated based upon the amount that the state has in escrow from my salary. And if the state is investing that particular money for about over a year, whatever interest it accrues actually stays in that escrow account, and that particular fund keeps on increasing over time. So just to address any rainy day activities and so on and so forth. So as an example, what I'm saying is my post-federal tax wage will not change up by a dime. It's going to be exactly the same.
So second question, I know that you mentioned New York, I think 2018, New York actually implemented this law. Employees pay 5% on all wages above 40,000.
Yes.
Doesn't change existing state tax, income tax. But one thing I want to know, is it you're talking about will change, they will see FICA tax, employees see reduction or reduce FICA tax?
See, the thing is, the only thing that I have taken a look at, because I did go over the New York scheme, but to tell you the truth, I'm still yet to understand 100% exactly how it is being done. But this is actually only a reduction in the federal taxes. The state income tax remains totally untouched. So we will not touch or we will not play with the state income tax because that is going to remain as is.
Thank you. A similar something, one of my friend actually sent, he was working long time, helping, I think, the state to repeal the car tax. This is something I think I want to share also with you all. Basically, is what you telling, Dr. Anwar, what I was telling is same thing I get from someone, say, substituting a payroll tax for the state's income tax could reduce federal tax liabilities of Connecticut residents and business by up to $2.6 billion. The mechanism, what you telling, if we follow, and split the benefit of the reduction in federal tax as follow. State of Connecticut will benefit 70% out of $2.6 billion. And taxpayer will be 27%. Business will be 3%, which is combined coming Connecticut $1.8 billion, which is I asked Dr. Anwar what will be benefited if we follow this mechanism. And taxpayer will benefit $720 million. Business will be $80 million. So all parties will be benefited, business, taxpayer, and also state of Connecticut. They can fill the big hole, 169 town and city, if we follow this. But it's not easy, very complicated to implement, and bringing all the business owner on board. Pretty much what are you exactly saying? This is what I'm looking for. Anyone else? Any question for Dr. Anwar?
One thing to mention, again, I think I need to look at the other scheme that you mentioned. But what I was saying is this is all going to be based upon personal income tax, so that we don't even want to give an impression to the to commercial entities that they are actually being targeted unfairly, or there's any perception that they are being targeted unfairly. So if, as an example, Hertz in Windsor, Windsor Locks, if they're actually paying a tax based upon their rental car to the town, that will remain as is, because that is actually not personal property or personal motor vehicle tax. Only personal taxes or personal income, the amount of tax that was being withheld for the federal income, that is going to change a little bit. And as long as this is all right, or as long as this is legal, because the federal government may not like it, and if that legality holds, then actually this is actually very it's a scheme to think about.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, we got in 169 town and city, the collecting 11 over almost $12 billion and serving our town and city. So real estate property tax, $9.731 billion they're collecting. Personal property tax, $820 million plus. And motor vehicle tax, 1.188. So we need the $2 billion hole to repeal this. Thank you so much for a great presentation. We really appreciate it. Really helpful. Anyone have any other thought and idea?
I do have a quick question for Professor Anwar.
Please, go ahead.
Please go ahead.
Are you, your idea is brilliant, but now question is are you looking at a time, some of the states are phasing it in or phasing it out? Are you suggesting a time frame, or is it instant application?
I mean, this could be instant, or this could actually, like the other states, as they actually have done, they actually have taken a 4 or 5 year window to phase out this motor vehicle tax. So we can also do it in the same fashion. So it's up to the state to decide, because it is not going to be. I mean, there are logistics that's behind this particular scheme, and that also needs to be looked into. That's something I have not looked into it at all. And the only thing is that the amount of money that we would like to generate, that is actually flexible. The only thing is, it depends upon that, do we take tax deduction on my net salary that was 100K, or do we do it on 95K? Because now the federal government is actually losing a taxes on my extra $5,000 that the state is actually putting in an escrow as a pre-tax. So there is no limit in that particular sense that how much money I can set aside, as long as it is federal government, or as long as it's accepted by the federal government.
Thank you.
Chief Packet, please.
There we go. Yes, I looked at this and the simple solution would be the West Virginia tax credit. But I think one of the problems with motor vehicle and personal property is its detriment to business investment. And I think it's why we see the cities empty out of businesses, especially that require investment. And we have a lot of business tax issues. I would like to see a gross receipts tax for all businesses, the elimination of personal property and motor vehicle taxes, the elimination of the corporate tax and the surcharge. And I said there were 7 different items. There's licensing issues as well for business expansion. And I sent all this to Mark Boughton. I can send it to the group, but I think we should think broadly about how to fix it. Ultimately, this is a 2% of the state and local budgets. And I think we could do better than a roundabout scheme that I think any scheme is fraught with problems and complicated, and people that don't do a lot of tax filing are going to have problems with it. Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Beckett, that is actually one of the issues, that if you're not filing taxes, then that particular scheme, or you're not on a payroll, as an example, then that particular tax cannot be withheld. And that actually becomes an issue. And that is something we need to sort it out, that how to address these special cases so that the policy that is going to be adopted by the legislator is actually fair and is fair to all.
Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you, Senator. My name's Matt Hart. I'm with the Capital Region Council of Governments, and I'm a new addition to the task force, and really appreciate an opportunity to be here. A question, I assume we have the DRS represented on the subcommittee so that they can help us vet what's administratively feasible for the department and the agency.
There is no appointee from the DRS.
There is no point to a DR.
Whoa. I'm here. I'm the commissioner of DRS. I'm on this committee.
Great. Good to see you.
Oh, I didn't even see you here. I'm sorry. Welcome, Commissioner. Please. My co-chair, Brandon, please.
Thank you, Senator. So since we've met last, I did a little bit of research here. Obviously, the purpose of this subcommittee was to research ways in which the state could make up the lost revenue of eliminating the car tax. According to OPM, about $1.04 billion is raised in revenue off the car tax each year at the municipal level. So I used about $1 billion of revenue we would need to replace. And I have some information here from OFA about what we would need to do to reform our overall tax structure in order to make up that $1 billion. So the first thing I'd like to offer is making our state income tax more progressive by creating more tax brackets within that. So the first tax bracket, it would be a 1% state income tax increase in people earning over $1 million a year. That would provide approximately $369 million in new revenue to the state. The second new bracket would be for $2 million a year in income and above. That bracket would be set at 8.99%, which would raise an additional $177 million per year. Those two tax increases would still keep Connecticut state income tax rates below our neighbors in Massachusetts and New York. And finally, we would, if we instituted a 4% surcharge on capital gains tax rates, that would create an additional $584 million per year. And the total new revenue from those proposals would be $1.1 billion per year. So that would more than make up for the loss in revenue to the towns. Obviously, the trouble there would be the logistics of the state providing grants or distributing the funds to the towns. I know that that's a sensitive subject up here, and I am very sympathetic to the towns when they say the state has broken promises in the past, so I could see why the towns would be skeptical. But as I said, we were tasked on looking for ways the state could create revenue in order to fulfill the promise if we were to eliminate the car tax. And I think that that would be the most simple way. Obviously, it has political considerations. It would be difficult to overcome, but that would easily make up for removing the car tax, and it would unburden working and middle class people throughout the state. And the only people really impacted by that in a negative way would be people earning over $1 million per year. So that was the first idea I wanted to float out there. If anybody has any questions on that, I could answer them, or I could put forward another idea, if that's okay, Senator.
That's a great idea, I think. And this is Tamim. My approach has been to look at the cost and revenue of the state. And as Senator Rahman said, that we need to raise $1.2 billion. So what are the sources? I mean, the sources could be some slight increase in property tax and real estate tax, slightly. I mean to say by slightly, 1 to 2%. And income tax to be raised by slightly, not all on over $1 million, but people who have $100,000 or more, slightly, some small changes in income tax rates, which again is an issue of the state. If they can pass the legislation, like, currently, for example, over $1 million people have an effective tax rate of 5.34%. So if this could be gradually raised over the next 5 years from 2024, like 5.75, 5.92, ending up at 6.47. Anyway, small changes like that could get us around 400 million or so, starting lowly from 375 to $400 million plus, but still has a gap. That gap is too large, $1.2 billion. And looking over the time frame, we have to have other sources, whether those sources could be Dr. Anwar's approach of getting additional tax, or getting, you say, being progressive, which I completely support you, Brandon, and getting some income tax, changes in income tax. But what I have read in most of the states that have done that, most of the states have talked about general appropriation. That means getting tax somewhere from sales tax changes or some other appropriation. So we have to see what. I am strictly a factual guy. I'm looking at the numbers, and I don't see how this can be filled in unless we identify other sources of income.
Just a point of clarification. The scheme that I was discussing does not increase any taxes at all. It does not penalize the towns because they are getting exactly the same amount of money, because I'm paying it directly to the town, but I'm getting compensated later based upon a scheme that actually sets aside a certain amount as a pre-tax, and that is done by the state. So there are no additional taxes that is required. I mean, and it is as if nothing has actually changed. Only thing is, the federal government is actually slightly getting a little bit less amount of money from the state of Connecticut.
Dr. Anwar, I have a question for you. Do you think that to accommodate this stuff, it has to go through the Congress, or IRS can do it independently? Do you know the law?
I do not know anything about it.
Okay.
My understanding is the state of New York has something similar, but not exactly the same.
Okay.
And that is, so I was thinking more in terms of when I actually invest in my 403B, that is a tax deferred investment. So my understanding is then, why don't I simply create what you call an account with the state, where the state is going to what you call set aside a certain amount of money pre-tax, and that is going to cover or whatever I have paid, or that should compensate for whatever I have paid as motor vehicle tax. So my wage, that my take-home salary, doesn't change at all. The state income tax doesn't change at all. And the money that the towns are actually getting as motor vehicle tax, that's not changing at all. So there are no new taxes. And the only thing is we actually play a little, what they call financial game that is going to generate the money that we are actually looking for.
I just want to a little bit echo Brandon what he said. It is really regressive. It is really complicated. Some towns saying is more cost than whatever they are collecting. Sometimes for $50 they expend $200 for collecting this $50. Chasing the residents, sometimes moving out is difficult to collect. So I am with Representative Brandon. It is really, it's not going to affect anyone. I see that it will be really fair, because $600 Toyota Corolla in Hartford pay tax. 2019 Toyota Corolla pays $600, and Greenwich or any other town, Darien, paying $292. I mean, this is not even a half; it's a doubled up, and I think this is really regressive and complicated tax. We should leading the nation. We should not be behind. 18 states don't have the car tax, and our neighbor state, New York, Pennsylvania, Rhode Island, and just 2024, I think will be implemented new tax in Virginia, West Virginia also. So thank you for your really good thought, and it is something we really need to look into closely.
I have one other comment, if I may, Senator.
Please.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. So I know the purpose of this task force is to investigate eliminating the car tax altogether. I did look over the OPM data that was sent regarding, what the total grand list, total vehicle value in the state, and total tax collected off of those vehicles. And just some rough calculations. I did a basic calculation to see what the mill rate would be if we just had one flat tax throughout the state. Every single car would be taxed at the same value, and it would come out to about 28 mills. So that would end the disparity between, Honda Civic and Hartford being taxed 3 times the amount of a Honda Civic in Greenwich. When you look at the disparity in what these cars are taxed based on where they park at night, I think that it's absolutely absurd that the same exact vehicle, same exact model year, same exact mileage, you could be paying 3 times what someone else is just solely based on your zip code or where you reside. So I know that the purpose of this is to eliminate the car tax altogether. That's what we've been tasked with. I do think that a flat tax rate across the state would be a vast improvement over what we currently have. And it may be more feasible politically to get that done. So thank you for humoring me, Senator. I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you. Like I mentioned earlier, West Virginia, they didn't repeal the car tax. Instead, what they do, they credit basically end of the year when you submit the tax return, I believe, getting the credit. And this is also something we can look into, keeping the 169 town and city as it is. They can collect the tax because sometimes they don't trust a state it really will be reimbursed or no. So for peaceful their mind, we can keep as it is. They can continue collecting the tax, and then state can reimburse giving the tax credit to the taxpayer end of the year. But then they've been saying also we must maybe have to put the cap on, otherwise town maybe they're gonna obviously maybe gonna charge more, or either reimbursing the town or giving the credit to the taxpayer. So that's also something maybe we can review down the road. Thank you. Anyone has any other presentation? Any question for Dr. Mehdi or Dr. Ahmed or Brandon?
Yes, Senator, if I may, I have a quick question for Mr. Brandon, and I think the DRS Commissioner might give us some lights on it. My curiosity was that right now the Rhode Island income tax, state income tax is 5.9, and I believe Connecticut is 6.99. And these are tax deductible for the federal income tax. That's my understanding. So even though they increase, the $1 million bracket people also will not just pay a little bit more income tax, they will benefit also from, they will have more expensive car, the property tax will be gone. So there is some winning part of that idea. My question to you is that, do you see any negative impact on tax, high bracket taxpayer moving out of the state, going to other states? Do you see any pattern, influx or outflux from state? Like after COVID, we noticed that a lot of New Yorkers moved into Connecticut, which definitely have helped our state. As a small businesses, we noticed a lot of influx from New York state residents moving towards our area. Do you see any pattern or any kind of problem with that?
So obviously the article we sent to just getting some kind of idea what other state does, to repeal their car tax previously, including the Connecticut also previously attempt to repeal the car tax 2005, I believe. So those the article we sent to just review for you guys. We don't see any problem, but there is what we're hearing today. Important thing is the idea how we can repeal, not just also that, then the big whole, the town and city, how we can generate the $1.2 billion. That's the main key. This is the reason a task force created to look into closely, not rationally making the decisions. So I don't see any problem over there. Thank you. Representative Brandon, please.
Yeah, just to answer the question, I mean, that's always the fear. And when we discuss raising, the top marginal rates or the capital gains rates, is that people are going to flee the state. I think that narrative is overblown personally. I think that Connecticut's geography and our proximity to Wall Street is really the reason that we have so many wealthy individuals living in the state. And if you look at just the demographics as to where most wealthy people live, it's Fairfield County, it's closer to New York. These are people who commute into the city or have businesses that are reliant on their proximity to New York. So people fleeing the state, I think that that's overblown. Obviously that's not everybody in the state who makes over $1 million a year doesn't work on Wall Street. There are people who have businesses or people that have other sources of income. But again, if you have a successful business, it's making you over $1 million a year in Connecticut. Are you going to pack your bags and leave Connecticut over a 1% increase in taxes? I think that that's very unlikely. I'm sure that some people would leave. That's the risk you run. And like I said, I know that we have these discussions internally at the Capitol often. And my personal view, once again, is Connecticut benefits from our geography and proximity to Wall Street. And, I don't see people fleeing over the border to New Jersey or New York, taxes that have higher tax rates than we do, to escape a 1% increase in income tax. And just a follow-up on that point, many people don't realize that before Connecticut instituted its state income tax, we derived the bulk of revenue from capital gains and interest and dividend taxes. So one of the kind of the dirty secrets, I think, in our tax policy is when the state did implement the income tax for everybody across the board, it actually was a fairly large tax cut for the wealthiest people in the state, and it shifted the burden onto working people and middle class people. So thank you, Co-Chair Rahman.
Thank you. Thank you. Anyone has any thought and idea? Any more question? I see the.
I have one, MD.
Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah, I think we shouldn't compare income tax rates to Massachusetts and New York. I think our bigger problem is people that are 6 months and a day away, and they already, if they make $1 million, often have 2 or 3 homes. And whether they make their permanent residence Florida or Tennessee, New Hampshire or other states that are lower taxes, they're used to commuting, and computers allow us to do a lot more trading and information remotely, as we've seen with COVID. So I think we have to be cognizant of the fact that people would not be residents in Connecticut at all, but would still be here for 3, 4, 5 months a year and register their cars out of state and everything else.
I think that it's an important point, but I would suggest that probably a lot of that registration of cars in other states, for those who are living part-time in other states anyway, people are already avoiding the car tax by registering their cars there in the first place, as they are in some cases, even if they don't live in those states. So it cuts both ways on that one too.
Completely agree.
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner, you want to say a few things?
Yeah, just real quick. I just
Please.
want to share with the committee that the perception out there is that in order to establish residency in another state, it's 6 months and a day, and that does the trick for it. And while that is part of the test, that is not the complete test that we use to determine your domicile. It's 6 months and a day, plus you must have abandoned Connecticut. That's right in the statute, the term abandoned. And that means that we will look at things like your primary, what kind of house do you own? If many people do have, as Chip mentioned, do have multiple homes throughout the world, some in France and Florida and Connecticut. That we would not consider that, even though they're not in Connecticut for, even though they're here for less than 6 months a day, we wouldn't consider them. We would consider them residents of Connecticut because they haven't abandoned Connecticut. We also look at family ties. Are their children still here? Are their grandchildren still here? So time is an important piece of this discussion, but it's really a multi-part test to determine somebody's domicile. It's not quite as easy as just saying, and people do think this. They come to us and say, well, I moved to Florida and, I was down there for 6 months and a day. I'm not paying state income tax. We're like, no. Your home is still here. You haven't abandoned Connecticut. Your job is still here, even though you're using a computer from Florida. You're paying state of Connecticut income tax. So it's a little bit more complicated than that, but certainly understand that. And the other thing I would just say is, look, we just went through a legislative session where we rolled back the income tax. I would be concerned about putting proposals forward that would then go back and add a millionaire's tax or add in new brackets or add in more taxes. Whether or not the actual your net when you walk out the door is less, the perception here is what I think the governor and the legislature is battling, that Connecticut is a high tax state. So I would be careful about how even things that might net out as even a savings for certain classes or what we call deciles of taxpayers, how that necessarily would be perceived in the business community and the general community at large. We're about ready to drop our tax incident study. I would take a look at that carefully, this committee, and go through that. Everybody will pull what they want out of it. It always happens that way. But I think it's absolutely clear that the property tax in general, including homes as well as motor vehicle, is the most regressive tax we have. That generally, when you look at our state tax system, it's fairly progressive, going up through the brackets. But once you overlay the property tax, it can be crushing to residents in the state, and obviously the motor vehicle tax is part of that. As Mayor Florsheim will tell you, though, that revenue pays a lot of bills. There are firefighters and police officers and teachers that, to deliver core services that cities and towns need. And so, I know the balance of this committee is to try to determine how do you replace that revenue versus eliminating the tax. And then the only thing I would also mention would be that whatever you recommend, and I think I mentioned this at the last meeting, many of those states, Massachusetts included, put a property tax cap in place. And so it's important that, if you make more revenue available, it doesn't get gobbled up in things like contracts and other things and the cost of operating government, because then you're going to be chasing your tail, and cities and towns will be chasing their tail. Now, I know, when I was a mayor, a property tax cap used to freak me out and I would fall on the ground, but I think it can be done without many workarounds. If you put a lot of workarounds, then you're going to have cities and towns out there that are going around the cap. So just think about those things as we have this discussion. And finally, just remember that Connecticut is an AGI state. We go off the adjusted gross income. We do not itemize deductions. New York itemizes all their deductions. So while they're a higher rate at 7.99%, you're allowed to take charitable donations as deductions. You cannot do that in Connecticut. We go off the adjusted gross income of the federal return. And that's about half the states in the US do that. Half the states allow a significant amount of deductions. So just keep that in mind as you're looking at different ideas and thoughts.
Mark, what about sales tax? Because I know if we join the sales tax compact, they said that would bring in $700 million, and but it also is probably a better tax policy as far as avoidance and that sort of thing. Is that a reasonable thing from your perspective?
Well, the problem with the sales tax compact is that you have to spread that out amongst all products. In other words, you'd have to tax the same thing Pennsylvania does. And in Connecticut, we have a lot of carve-outs for a lot of different kinds of products, medical goods, food, things like that. So you'll be able to flatten the tax. There's no question about that, but you're going to have to charge tax in areas we never charged it before. That brings a lot of political pressure and debate in the legislature. And that's why we've never been a member of that. So that's certainly something you can look at, and certainly, yeah, you're going to get that revenue is going to come from somewhere, and it's going to come from people's pockets paying on products they never had to pay for in the past. Now, I would argue a flatter tax that covers everything is a lot easier to manage than what we have now, which is where there's certain products we exempt and certain we don't. But in general, that's been the negative. And then, the issue there is also you can use the same point of sale equipment. So you go to a store and you check out, and that tax automatically gets sent into us, and then we can arbitrage it and do all kinds of things with it, invest it. But the reality is that's not where our tax gap is. Our tax gap isn't on the Home Depots, and it's not on, you know, the Lowe's. They're already have already digitized their sales tax remittances. That's not a problem. The problem is the small businesses that operate on the margins, that operate in cash. And those, they're not going to spend time to purchase a point of sale equipment or even be mandated to do it or even learn how to do it. That black market economy is going to continue. That's the area that we're concentrating on right now. And that's the area that we need to do a better job in collections. But it's painful. I mean, I'm just telling you, we're out doing audits right now of small businesses, small restaurants, and they are not happy we're in their business. But some of those cases, we can prove that they have not submitted their full liability to the state.
Thank you, Commissioner. Jennifer, please.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Jennifer. I work for OPM. One of the questions I have, and I don't know what the appetite would be, but considering this is a motor vehicle tax and we're talking about taxing anywhere from commercial to grandma that drives only a couple of miles, I wonder what the impact would be to the gas tax if we increase the gas tax to account for those people that are actually driving on our roads. It would help us with the folks that are registered out of state but still use our roads. I don't know how much we would need to generate or how much the gas tax would have to increase to account for that $1 billion. But I think that might be a way that we could generate the amount of money and only target the people that it affects.
I mean, I could say from DRS's viewpoint, we could look at that. I would tell you that I would be careful about the gas tax because of our movement to EVs and to alternative fuel vehicles, that we're starting to see a drop in gas tax revenues. So, you know, and I know nobody wants to hear this, but in the next 5 to 10 years, there'll be discussion about a mileage-based user fee and how we tax, you know, where most of the country is going to move to that model where you don't tax gas, you tax how many miles you drive. Now, could you build it into that new fee once we figure out how that works and we go through the angst of doing that? Probably. And it might be a good opportune time to have this conversation and say that that's really what we're going to target. But I serve on several national panels for the motor-based user fee, and or mileage-based user fee, excuse me. And it's an interesting debate and discussion, but it's in states that are really doing a good job at EV adoption. We're really starting to see their gas tax crash, and obviously that's less money for infrastructure.
Thank you, Commissioner. Anyone else there? Any question or idea? Thank you. Like I mentioned earlier, Commissioner, Connecticut real estate taxes, town and city collecting over almost $10 billion. That's just real estate tax. And then also personal property tax, small businessmen, they're also paying a lot of tax, which is $820 million they're paying. And motor vehicle tax, almost $2 billion. So about $12 billion Connecticut resident paying just for car tax, personal property tax, and real estate tax. That's not even involved also income tax. So very good stuff today. We got like a couple of different idea, increasing the income tax, certain certain people, certain income cap, and also adding this, basically saying mill rate, like if we keeping like 32.46 like right now, and until mill rate comes zero, that's also another thing we can look into closely. So there's all the good stuff. Also, Dr. Anwar brought up the, this is that one I really like mostly, creating the town and city and the business owner, everyone, all the resident will be benefited like $2.6 billion in Connecticut was reduction, which is federal tax will pay 116 town and city we can generate $2.6 billion. 1.8 billion dollar could be the state can make and reimburse the town and city. That's the idea. Also, I like this. So we will have the also next meeting. I think next week Wednesday.
This week.
10th subcommittee meeting. We will continue speak about how we can reduce how repeal the car tax and generate the lost income for 169 town and city. This is something we really need to look into closely. Like I said, $12 billion Canadian resident paying just 3 tax: personal property tax, real estate tax, and car tax. So we will talk more about this issue next meeting. And if no one have any question or idea, anything, so I like to jump the meeting today. And next, I will see you all. Next meeting is January 10th at 11 a.m. Thank you.